Chapter 629. Fei Jin had already boarded the streetcar heading to Acumen College. Luo Nan had been delayed by Tianbang, so he had most likely missed this train. The two controllers didn't feel that this was a pity. This sort of chance encounter was not worth it, especially since Luo Nan was at the most critical moment of his mental analysis. The Bloodflame Order's base in Xia City quieted down as well. Mrs. Halder had roughly finished categorizing the intelligence data and was put together for the final time. She pulled out the third set of data that had never been put to use before. It was the list of Luo Nan's discussions of cultivation theory and lectures. She paused for a moment and searched through the other two groups, especially the group with the Mask of Strength. She put the data in one by one. Inla calmed down and carefully observed. She discovered that the new data that Mrs. Halder had put in belonged to Luo Nan's performance when he dealt with Grey personnel. The so-called Grey personnel were neither friend nor foe. They were people who lacked friendship and good feelings. They were people who couldn't be considered mortal enemies. It wasn't just Tianbang. The Gossip's Lord, who had just spouted trouble, and OK, who had a conflict a few days ago over the location of the elusive secret device, were all in this group. If one were to go even further back, there were also a few ignorant second generations who dared to stroke a tiger's whiskers in the Ocean Sky Cloud City and Aurora Cloud City incident. There were also a few people from the management company in the Municipal Plaza incident. There were also a few people from the outer circle, represented by Hidong Lu, who were neither friendly nor aloof. Right now, Inla didn't need Mrs. Halder's guidance. Her mind was like a movie. She sorted through the data and a certain impression formed. She opened her mouth, wanting to speak, but she forcefully restrained herself. If you want to say it, then say it. Mrs. Halder's keen insight was displayed in full force at this moment. Inlu adjusted her breathing and said softly, I believe that Luo Nan is very distant from these people. Yes, distant. Aside from the few moments when he was stimulated to explode, where he had clear hostility and even killing intent, he basically ignored them. He was stiff, his thoughts jumped, and his mind was absent-minded. His mind wasn't on face-to-face communication at all. He was on a completely different frequency than these people. So, Mrs. Halder asked softly. Inlu was about to come to a conclusion, but she hesitated before she said, There's no strict classification of personas. It doesn't matter if it's the third persona. Perhaps we can call it the mask of alienation, for convenience. But we have to find the behind-the-scenes mechanism of its formation and operation to make sense. Mrs. Halder did not even raise her head. In other words, you only saw his attitude but not his logic. Inlu said, Boss, I believe that a person's thoughts and emotions are always continuous. From an outsider's point of view, it looked like it was jumping and torn, but from the person's point of view, it might be consistent and complete. It's just that we can't peek into people's hearts, we can only guess. Mrs. Halder interrupted her. Do you have any ideas? Inla took another breath and took the initiative to flip through the materials. She spent a few minutes and found two rather special examples in the third type of materials. During the Ocean Sky Cloud City incident, Luo Nan, Black Beetle, Puppeteer, Snake Tongue, and the others had a relatively long exchange during the deadlock stage. The contents were all related to formatting theory such as order frames, gear coupling, and so on. Even further back, during the Fudong Avenue Frost River reality incident, he and Fairchild, who had yet to be identified as friend or foe, engaged in a cultivation discussion that was completely incompatible with the atmosphere. And when I looked through the communication records of the time, Luo Nan had an argument with the support personnel of the Xia City branch. The logic was disjointed, making communication difficult. Of course, there were elements of formatting theory interspersed within. That's right. Inla clenched her fists as she let out a low cry. She was a bit annoyed, but she was even more excited. Actually, Mrs. Halder had long ago categorized all of this information. It was the same as giving her the most clear guidance. When the frequency was in sync, her train of thought naturally connected and flowed smoothly. I overlooked one point before. Formatting theory. This was the foundation of Luo Nan's existence. It was the foundation that separated him from external social relations. It was the foundation that was truly internalized. And the process of internalizing formatting theory should be the core element that influenced the composition of his personality. Then, I must start from the interaction between him and formatting theory. Yes, it can't be pure theory. There is also the enormous social and interpersonal pressure associated with it. Mrs. Halder's expression did not change. Her fingertips moved forward through a series of documents, finally stopping at a certain node. Luo Nan's formal contact with formatting theory should have been over 5 years ago. He was 10 years old at the time. A 10-year-old child with no foundation, no investment, no support, yet he resisted the enormous pressure to learn and inherit his grandfather's theory and grudges. There should be a sufficiently powerful motivation, right? Inla didn't hesitate to respond. His family changed greatly when he was young. His grandfather, father, mother, and practically all of his immediate family members were caught in the maelstrom of formatting theory. They were even annihilated. This stimulation was enough. You just mentioned the interaction. Formatting theory has the value of allowing him to continue researching it in depth. Also, there is the effect of empathy. Through research, he can converse with his relatives and elders. This is an extremely important psychological compensation. Of course, it is also a driving force. Mrs. Halder raised an eyebrow. So we need to consider what he has experienced in this series of processes. We need to consider what he has obtained. I remember that before Luonan made his debut, his results were a series of neurological drugs. How did he obtain them? Inla closed her eyes slightly. She put herself in Luonan's shoes and thought for a moment. She answered her own question. I heard that Luonan didn't have the conditions to test drugs. He could only use himself as a test subject. Of course, this process was filled with endless failures. It was extremely dangerous. He even struggled on the line between life and death. There was certainly anxiety, panic, self-doubt, and so on during this process. There were enormous sources of negative emotions. Mrs. Halder's voice entered her ears. But he has walked all the way to where he is now. He has obtained absolute accomplishments. So he has also obtained powerful self-confidence. No, that's wrong. Inli's eyes were still closed. She denied her initial inference. This was because there weren't many circumstances that matched Luonan's performance in reality. He wasn't a proud and self-confident person. It is said that the basis of his series of research and experiments all came from his grandfather's notes. In that case, he doesn't trust himself. He trusts his grandfather's theory, formatting theory. Inla suddenly opened her eyes. That's right. From Luonan's perspective, researching formatting theory is tantamount to having an endless conversation with formatting theory. He is endlessly receiving the guidance of his grandfather. He is endlessly overcoming challenges, obtaining sufficient positive feedback from them, and he continues to strengthen his confidence and dedication towards this theory. At the same time, the process of loneliness has given him no reference to compare himself to. It has strengthened his mentality by a factor of 2. So this has turned him into a person who has internalized the ideals of formatting theory. He has used the ruler of ideals to measure things internally and externally, to others and to himself. So this isn't a mask of alienation. It's a mask of ideals. He is a young man who uses theoretical research every day to converse with his grandfather and his parents. Laughing and cursing in anger, warm and cold, and other socializing traits are really useless. It would be better to use formatting theory to evaluate and test him. If there's meaning, then he'll research. If there's no meaning, then he'll ignore it. This is the standard by which he conducts his judgment. This is his true dominant mask. Chapter 630. She roughly understood the classification of Luonan's persona masks. There were far too many examples that she could refer to. The persona mask was essentially an archetype theory. Once the archetype was extracted, she could always find similar cases that corresponded with it. People like Luonan have existed since ancient times. Inla wanted to make a further analysis. What followed next seemed to be much easier. After all, even if she ignored all sorts of medical cases, a few famous people could still reflect each other. This was especially true in the East Asian cultural area with its long history of civilization. There were far too many famous people throughout history who wore a persona mask. Inli's thoughts spun and she thought of a fellow who was quite similar to Luonan. This person was a famous historian and politician. He belonged to the conservative faction. His mind was filled with patriarchal principles. He shut himself in a basement to write books for 15 years. The relevant concepts were completely internalized. Later on, when he was in power and governed the country, he would only listen to his ideas. He became a typical representative of people who talked reason behind closed doors. Don't casually bring out examples. Don't do stupid things like using words to destroy the meaning. Mrs. Halder saw through Inli's thoughts. She didn't let her thoughts wander too far. Luonan himself possesses an extremely special nature. No famous historical figure would have a semi-philosophical system like formatting theory, where the mighty power belongs to the self. Moreover, it can be practiced, applied, and modified at any time. Modified? Inlu was a bit stunned. Wasn't Luo Nan's persona mask an extreme paranoia towards formatting theory? In this way he should be like that extremely conservative historian. He couldn't change the laws of his ancestors in the slightest. Oh, hold on. There seems to be a problem with the direction. Mrs. Halder didn't test Yinlu any further. She straightforwardly expressed her opinion. Perhaps Luo Nan himself doesn't believe that formatting theory is completely correct. This can be seen from his attitude during the lecture on the 14th. Back then his speech was quite cautious. He always used self-mockery and jokes to dispel the extreme authority of formatting theory. Let's not talk about the more complicated background for now. From the analysis of these circumstances and the information we know, he is very stubborn towards formatting theory. However, he doesn't have a particularly paranoid view towards whether formatting theory is correct or not. In the end, his stubbornness towards formatting theory is just a kind of empathy. The ideals of formatting theory are just a mask he uses to treat his imaginary close relatives. This is because he only has this mask to choose from when facing his grandfather and parents in the void. To put it more bluntly, he is only courting. The word courting was a rather sensitive word. There were two ways to interpret it in the dictionary, and what the two first ablatums were communicating was obviously the more ancient kind, which was simply seeking affection. Is it a need for emotions and belonging? Yinlu took the initiative to analyze using Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Madame Halder agreed. You can say it that way. There is a high probability that Luo Nan himself is on the third level. He urgently needs the comfort of the relevant emotions. This is a pretty good starting point. But soon she changed the topic. But at the same time, you have to understand the influence of empathy. After a long period of empathy, to a certain extent, he was the projection of his grandfather and parents' needs. He wanted to fulfill the wishes of his closest kin, which made his needs much greater than that of a normal person. In such a situation he would most likely have the problem of being closely involved in the situation, and might not understand what he really needed. If we start from the emotional aspect, it might seem like a straight line, but it might actually be the most difficult path. This was equivalent to denying Yinli's thoughts. Yinli's eyebrows knitted together. She felt that it was a bit of a pity. After all, it's a core element. Mrs. Halder's lips hooked slightly. We aren't psychologists. We have no reason to treat him. Am I right? Okay, this reason was quite strong. Yinlu was dumbfounded. Of course, Yinlu understood Mrs. Halder's true meaning. If Luo Nan's core driving force was said to be courting, then the various personality masks were the outer muscles and bones. Using courting as the foundation to expand his mental power would form a permeating influence on all the personality masks. But this influence was distorted by his primal instincts and other factors, forming a bewildering barrier that Luo Nan himself might not be clear about. So he still relied on the personality mask both consciously and unconsciously, when it came to dealing with people and matters. In front of this defensive maze, the scalpel that was suitable for surgery might not be suitable for psychological attacks. Yinlu wasn't dejected. Instead, she felt that her thoughts were becoming clearer and clearer. Of course, her boss was far better than her boss. With her boss protecting her, she tried to continue deducing in a different direction. Then we can only start from the mask. Go from shallow to deep. Which mask? Of course it's the concept mask. There's no harm in being more specific. Yes, boss. Yinlu wasn't stingy with her words. She narrated her train of thought, allowing her boss to examine, refer, and verify. I'm using the method of elimination. Even if I can't be considered the dominant position of the concept mask, the other two masks need not be mentioned. The strong mask is too straightforward and simple. There's no way to beat around the bush. No matter who wins or loses, one side is bound to be smashed to pieces. It's not suitable. As for the weak mask, we can only start from emotions. The reason we can't do this is because there are too many uncontrollable factors, boss. Plus, under the influence of the core driving force of courting, we can deduce that this mask is actually an important source of replenishment for the psychological needs of courting. It looks weak, but it's actually extremely selfish and sensitive. I'm afraid that the concept mask on the other side will also be staring at us while we stare at this mask. If we aren't careful, we'll make a mistake and cause trouble. Mrs. Halder nodded slightly. Then we can only use the concept mask. Yes. Is there a better reason? Stability. The greatest advantage of the concept mask is stability. Mrs. Halder gave a smile that wasn't a smile. Are you sure? I'm sure. Yinli's thoughts reached this point, and she already grasped the pearl of wisdom. During the formation process of the concept mask, Luo Nan was in an extreme environment. He lacked a sense of security and he lacked true communication. Therefore, there's a high probability that he's a latent perfectionist with obsessive-compulsive symptoms. Sometimes he'll be extremely anxious, impatient, and weak. This matches with my previous analysis. But due to the special characteristics of the concept mask, the pressure of the symbiotic emotional and psychological elements will shift to other masks. This will become a high-probability event. For example, anxiety, panic, and weakness will be thrown to the weak mask. Ego, pride, and so on will be thrown to the strong mask. The elements left behind in the concept mask are relatively perfect. The more perfect it is, the more likely it will become the basis and yardstick for judgment. In this way, of the three main masks, the concept mask will inevitably be the core. The weak mask and the strong mask will wait for an opportunity to appear. From Luo Nan's daily behavior, he would be fine in a relatively simple situation. He would use the weak mask in front of friends and family to obtain sympathy and love. He would use the strong mask to erupt in front of a great enemy from the inner world, killing his way through. At this time, the two masks are relatively stable. His behavior and train of thought are easy to estimate. But the problem is that these are two completely different concepts and methods. I can't find a point of compromise between them. It would be fine if the logic of behavior was completely different from that of the inner world and that of the secular world. But there are quite a few overlaps. This creates a barrier. It creates a separation and a tear in behavior. Once the situation becomes complicated, for example in the water bar, where Big Mouth Chow of the Divine Research Society was disrespectful to his mother, the weak mask and the strong mask instantly switch. Luo Nan wanted to kill Big Mouth Chow, but his target was just an ordinary person with enmity. And because of Fei Jin's interference, the situation didn't reach its worst state. In this way, the strong mask wasn't completely suitable, and the weak mask didn't have the space to make an appearance. A tear was created, and the concept mask naturally filled in this gap. Luo Nan made a judgment based on the concept mask. Big Mouth Chow wasn't worth analyzing and pondering. There was no need to waste energy on him and create more trouble. So he restrained his emotions and Big Mouth Chow was able to preserve his life. In those few seconds, whether it was the weak mask or the strong mask, all of them revealed their unstable characteristics. Only the concept mask became the basis for Luo Nan's behavior. Yin Li's analysis took a long time, but the result was extremely clear. Though this is just an independent incident, I believe that a careful analysis of all of Luo Nan's related incidents will lead to this conclusion. Any long-term contact with his weak mask or strong mask, under the influence of many factors, will ultimately face the judgment of the concept mask. Rather than this, it would be better to make preparations to communicate with the concept mask from the very beginning. This way the uncertainties will be reduced to the minimum. Mrs. Halder listened quietly. She no longer tidied up the materials. In the end, she even narrowed her eyes. Her face was like an ancient well without ripples, concealing all of her emotions. Yin Lu had been brimming with confidence when she made a long speech, but she felt an inexplicable lack of confidence when she saw this situation. "Boss, did I say something wrong?" "No, you didn't. Unless we are able to squeeze into Luo Nan's circle of friends and family in the first instance, this is the only path we can take." Mrs. Halder opened her eyes, but her gaze was cast toward the neon-changing night sky outside the window. "I was just thinking that headquarters of the Ability User Society, as well as a few other people, were in a rush to appear. They didn't complete their task, but they did leave us plenty of references. We can be considered lucky, but will we succeed in one fell swoop? Or will we become one of the many examples for others to analyze and ridicule?" "Boss." Yin Lu was shocked and at a loss. She didn't know why Mrs. Halder had suddenly sighed with emotion. Those who predict others also predict others. Those who know others don't necessarily know themselves. Only with this kind of self-awareness can we face the future with a good attitude. Mrs. Halder chuckled. Her gaze turned to Yin Li's youthful, tender, and beautiful face. "Let's do things according to your train of thought. Come up with a plan tonight and let me see it tomorrow morning." "All right. Take Fei Jin home first. Don't let anything go wrong." With that, she stood up and walked out of the room. "Boss, here. Going out to relax." Chapter 631. It was already 2 o'clock in the morning. The main restaurant of the Starry Sky Club was temporarily quiet. As the manager, Sun Jai didn't hesitate to use her privilege to give herself a day off. She took her new prey back to Xia City for fun. Walking in the empty underground garage, they talked and laughed. It was inevitable that they would have some physical contact. Sun Jai didn't know which detail aroused her desire. She suddenly pressed the young female model against the hood of the car. Her hands moved up and down as the model groaned in pain. The female model was startled and struggled instinctively. Godmother, this is the surveillance area. Sun Jai didn't even raise her head. Only her laughter came from the place where they touched. Enjoy yourself in time. Be timely. The female model didn't struggle and half of her clothes were taken off. She didn't know what to do. Suddenly the one on top of her stopped moving. Their bodies were squeezed together and slightly trembled with their breaths. Godmother? The female model asked in a daze. That's why I said this kind of problem will happen if I'm not timely. Sun Jai sighed and straightened up. She inserted her fingers into her short but thick hair and combed it a little. Then her smile was bright and brilliant. Even though she was old enough to be the mother of the female model, her carefree and casual attitude was far beyond the pretentious handsome men and beautiful women in the circle. She patted the female model's cheek. Plans can't keep up with changes. Something is coming. Go back to the club and have a rest. I'll come to you after I deal with things. The female model was pulled up. She was confused and let Sun Jai tidy up her clothes. Sun Jai's actions were gentle and affectionate. She was a little moved. Godmother, I'll accompany you. Sun Jai just smiled. At this time, the butterfly door of the sports car opened. She gave the female model another gentle kiss and then sat in the car, isolated from the outside world. The sports car roared. It drove out of the parking space and sped up in the underground garage. In the car, Sun Jai looks at the rearview mirror. Of course, she is not looking at her goddaughter, who is still confused behind the car. She wants to confirm whether the person who made her get into the car, licked the back of her neck with invisible flames, and threatened her life is the person she guesses. There was a figure in the rearview mirror. But just by looking at his face, it was an unfamiliar face that he had never seen before. It was a young married woman. She was somewhat good-looking and her makeup was exquisite, but it was hard to recognize her. Even though Sun Jai had undergone strict memory training, she still hesitated for a moment before confirming that she had indeed never met this person before. However, the flickering flames in his eyes gave Sun Jai more confidence. Directly oppressing the medulla oblongata, disrupting the blood vessel's activity, but it seems to exist but not exist and enter but not enter. Such exquisite control of flames. Madam? In the back seat, the young woman's lips curled up. It wasn't a particularly stunning face, but because of this micro-expression, it brought about an extraordinary aura. Sun Jai confirmed it and sighed. Madam, where do you want to go? The young woman casually said, Anywhere. I'm bored and want to talk to someone. All right. Sun Jai's index finger tapped on the steering wheel twice, and the car's AI kicked in, entering autopilot mode. This sort of basic function was fine, but why didn't it do its job when she wanted it to guard against theft? Sun Jai sighed again, but she didn't turn her head. She propped one hand on the steering wheel and continued combing her hair with the other. Her body language carried a bit of helplessness. Madam, we actually don't need to meet in this manner. Even if we want to be safe, we can just use a ready-made tool like Fei Jin. Right now in Xia City, there are less and less soul envoys of your order. It's too much of a pity to use them and then scrap them. It's nothing. Compared to an insignificant soul envoy, it would be a real pity if your identity as multifaceted were to crumble. Oh. Sun Jai, otherwise known as multifaceted, stopped what she was doing. Through the rearview mirror and the soul envoy, she locked gazes with Madame Halder, who was hundreds of kilometers away. Madam, are you still brooding over what happened at the seaside villa? Believe me, the Order of Souls. Don't worry about the Order of Souls. I came here today to express my gratitude. That persona, intelligence gave us a very important inspiration. It also allowed us to clearly define the entry point for our work in the near future. It was excellent. Sun Jai raised an eyebrow. You call this gratitude? Oh, I'm sorry. This is probably an overreaction from eating shitty chocolate. The scorching sensation at the back of her neck showed no signs of disappearing. It even increased. It was like the endless accumulation of negative emotions beneath Sun Jai's smile. Therefore, Sun Jai was like a gold medal after-sales service. No matter how great the customer's resentment was, she would always maintain her smile. Madam, based on our good business reputation, I feel that we can use a more appropriate method to deal with this problem. If the intelligence is flawed, we can discuss it further. If it doesn't work out, we can always go through the process of a refund. I said it before. The intelligence is excellent. But the more it is so, the more vexed I become towards your disgraceful behavior of marrying a woman to more than one marriage and the intentions behind it. This was true fire. Sun Jai could even smell the strange smell of charred hair at the back of her head. There might even be the fragrance of meat mixed within. Sun Jai didn't blink. Her smile didn't change. Think about my nickname, madam. Forgive me for being rude, but I'm not a full-time intelligence agent for your order. Madame Halder also sent a smile through the Soul Envoy. However, the multifaceted I know is a top-notch broker and intelligence expert who can cooperate with many large and medium-sized organizations, including the Blood Flame Order. He should have the corresponding professional qualities. But look at what you've done. You set up the Persona Intelligence Report as a group message and gave it to almost everyone in your intelligence circle. Sun Jai had no choice but to interrupt. Madam, it's my freedom to choose how I sell it. Furthermore, I've already stated this before I sold it. I admit that Persona is expensive, and the content inside is also half-baked. But right now Mr. Luo is the focus of the entire world. His intelligence is worth this price, even if it's just a summary article. A small premium is a very standard market practice. I believe that for all parties with interests, including the Blood Flame Order, this isn't much. Chapter 632. Sun Jai finally blinked. Hint. Inside the carriage, Madame Halder's will transformed into a low vibration in the young woman's throat. You said to everyone, start from the angle of the mask, and that was the basic method to uncover the true value of the information. It was exactly according to your train of thought that Yin Lu and I took less than an hour to complete the clues and perfect the logic. The two of us can solve the problem. With your ability, can't you do it with a few psychologists? Once it's complete, the value of the information will definitely soar, and the profits will be 10 times more than what it is now. Why didn't you do such a good thing? Sun Jai pressed her forehead and smiled helplessly. Madam, hearing you say that makes my heart ache. I'm afraid I've lost a lot of money in this business. Speak properly. No matter how healthy your cardiovascular function is, if your medulla oblongata is burned through, it will be meaningless. Under the powerful pressure of the Yin flames, Sun Jai's breathing became chaotic. Her heart beat wildly and her brain lacked oxygen. She became dizzy and numb. Even so, she forced herself to maintain a smile and looked directly at the flickering flames in the rearview mirror. Madam, you think too highly of me. The burning sensation and pressure at the back of her neck eased. Sun Jai seized the opportunity to spit out all the words she had been suppressing in her chest. You and Deputy Officiant Yin are both top-notch figures in the inner world. How can you force others to do what you can? Besides, I only named you because I saw Mr. Luo's age and dull personality. It doesn't match your great reputation, so I thought of it. This time, it was Sun Jai's turn to be interrupted. The young woman's original voice rang out, conveying Madame Halder's will. It had nothing to do with Sun Jai's defense. Of course I think highly of you. Our cooperation has been on and off for 15 years. Perhaps at that time, you were only at the age of your goddaughter. I have many goddaughters. Madam, which one are you talking about? Sun Jai's forehead and back were already drenched in cold sweat. This was a natural reaction of her body and she couldn't control it. Only the smile on her face was nearly perfect. Knowing that Sun Jai was still spouting nonsense, Madame Halder no longer made meaningless threats. The woman in the front row had already used facts to prove that ordinary interrogation techniques had no significant effect on her. Madame Hard said, from what I know, the name multifaceted has quite a bit of status in the intelligence circles of Xia City, but there aren't many people who know of your true identity. Do you remember how I found out about your identity? It's because of an investment. Oh. Sun Jai's gaze swept over the rearview mirror, and she saw that the eyes behind the lenses were fiery and cold, so piercing that she almost narrowed her eyes. Since the other party had directly pointed it out, it would be too impolite to try to go around it. Yes, I remember. At that time, you were expanding your business and needed a large sum of money, and I happened to have a client who was looking for a project with a higher return on investment. Then, I did my job and became the intermediary between the two of you. After a while, you got to know each other. The young woman in the back seat laughed. How broad-minded. In my memory, I contacted that investor very quickly and started a deeper cooperation. I tossed you to the side and saved quite a bit of intermediary fees. But what made people sigh with emotion was that you easily acquiesced, and everyone maintained a cooperative relationship. Nothing went wrong. Sun Jai lifted the short hair on her forehead, and her smile deepened. Madam, have you always harbored a guilty conscience? I only remember that when the order withdrew from Xia City in a panic, I took the initiative to contact you. Of course, I knew very well that you wouldn't be of any help at that time. I just wanted to use you to try and convince that investor to continue to invest. But you disconnected at that time. Oh, I'm sorry. I had too much fun that night. In the following period of time, my cooperation with you was completely severed. This was completely in sync with that investor's attitude. Madam, my business is limited to Xia City. But why is it that when the 2000th of a misincident occurred? More accurately speaking, when the Hill of Bones where Jin Tong was buried appeared in the outer seas of Xia City, our relationship suddenly became closer? Sun Jai could only sigh. Business is business. Madam, why do you have to be so calculative? The sports car shuttled back and forth on the high-speed maglev roads of the mountainous region, but the car suddenly sank into a state of silence. The young woman's soul sender in the back seat seemed to have lost her soul once more. She didn't respond. Sun Jai couldn't help but have a thought. If she were to jump out of the car right now, what were the chances of her escaping this life-threatening trouble? This silence lasted for 5 seconds or maybe even 10. Only then did Madame Halder's will manifest once more through the voice of the young woman in the back seat. Every time I hear the words business is business, I feel a chill in my heart. But when it comes from your own mouth, it feels completely different. The tone was gloomy and cold. It was vastly different from the overbearing feeling from before. This caused Sun Jai to react a bit slower. Before she could figure out how to divert this dangerous topic, she was pierced by the flaming gaze of the car's rearview mirror. This soul sender was definitely crippled. An indescribable thought popped up in Sun Jai's mind. Then she heard the other party's voice again. You don't have to explain or hide it anymore. In the short term, my judgment of your identity will not change. I came to find you tonight and spoke to you. There was no element of probing in it. I just wanted to inform you, and vent. Madam, I hope you can convey my attitude and the corresponding judgment to that person. I'm talking about the judgment of her current investment project. In the car, only the low voice of the soul sender reverberated. You didn't give me the complete information. Instead, you acted like a foolish and greedy businessman. You dug out a gold mine but haven't fully explored its reserves yet. You couldn't wait to package it up and sell it off. You even married one woman to another. Do you feel that this gold mine is more effective and that you won't be able to sell it for a good price if you sell it later? Or do you not think highly of the gold mine's reserves so you don't hesitate to ruin your reputation in order to make money first? Or do you want to deliberately muddy the waters and obtain even greater benefits from a level unknown to others? Out of respect for that investor, I choose the third option. Sun Jai also fell silent. She no longer tried to correct Madame Halder's train of thought. The information you gave me seems to be a half-finished product. In reality, although the value of the complete information is high, it is very difficult to sell it for a suitable reason. The half-finished information doesn't have this kind of sensitivity. Instead, it is easier to conceal your intentions. Some people will mistakenly believe that gold has been dug out from the sand, but they will ignore the direction behind it. After all, Luonan is quite simple. His personality, strong points, and weak points can be discovered as long as one puts in a bit of thought. And it is because he is simple that there are only a limited number of places that can be used. If one side exerts force, the results will be obvious. If two sides exert force, there will be variables. And if more than 3 sides exert force together, it will become complete chaos. Under the interference of many sides, the designs and schemes of each side will not be able to achieve the desired results. The struggle surrounding Luonan will only become more complicated. Madame Halder took the initiative to stop and catch her breath upon speaking to this point. She even extinguished the invisible Een fire on the back of Sun Jai's neck. Her attitude seemed to be easing up. Her originally straight back leaned back, making her look more like a passenger hitching a ride. She even asked for some opinions. Aren't there too many elements of conjecture? Sun Jai thought for a moment and said, there has to be a source of inspiration. A bit of stimulation or something. Yeah, there are 2 sources. The first is Een Lu. She said that the uncertainties need to be reduced to a minimum. I have a very bad feeling about this. The second one. Do you know that Luonan and Tianbang ran into each other on the streets tonight? I haven't received any tip-offs yet. But Madame said that they ran into each other by chance. I think that it really was a coincidence. Perhaps. But with Tianbang's intelligence, how could he not know that communicating with Luonan in a hurry would only irritate him? He wouldn't achieve any results? And with his personality, he would probably rather bump into He Yuan's cold rebuke than engage in a meaningless entanglement with Luonan. So I believe that even if this encounter was a coincidence, he must have made some preparations in his mind. Perhaps he has grasped the principles and techniques of communicating with Luonan. Or perhaps he is still a bit lacking and wants to do some verification. He must have a share of your information. Now we can make the final inference. I once believed that you were making a fuss about Luonan. You used him as bait to draw away the attention of others, making it convenient for you to act. But then I thought of something she once told me. Investors act sneakily for the sake of controlling costs. But in the end they always need an enthusiastic response. After a brief pause, the young woman in the back seat spat out a clear word from her lips. The blood flame order has been forcefully stopped before they can obtain an enthusiastic response. But you guys are already reaping the rewards from Luonan, right? If this is the case, I can roughly guess the position of that investor. The sports car had already driven onto the ring highway by now. The northern boundary of Xia City was higher in altitude. Looking through the front windshield of the car, most of the city district of Xia City was converged into a sea of lights. It was truly beautiful. And the mountainous region the car drove through became a scene of thick ink. It was connected to the faraway corners of the stars. The sports car pierced through the barrier of the air, whistling through the air with a humming sound. It was as if it had crossed the boundary between the wilderness and civilization in an instant. It was as if it had traveled from one dimension to another. Nothing seemed to have changed, but in reality, the endlessly expanding air pressure within the sports car was like an incorporeal bomb. It could explode at any moment. Sun Jiai's voice came from the front driver's seat at a certain point before the explosion. It was just that it carried a peculiar tone. I've always been amazed by your gambling decisiveness. At the same time, I have reservations about your self-destructing inner core. This kind of heart isn't a good place to be. In the back seat, the soul sender suddenly raised his head. The eyes reflected in the rearview mirror were truly burning. Chapter 633. It was not even 7 o'clock in the morning. The winter solstice had just passed, and the early morning of Xia City did not provide enough light. The faint light from the sky could not penetrate the lake, so the bottom of the lake was still dark from the public activity area. Only when the enormous devil ray swam past the protective glass did the water become somewhat lively. Xie Junping did his morning exercise all the way to school. He bought some snacks on the way and arrived at North Shore Gear. He arrived relatively early. There was no one here except for Shui Lei, who woke up earlier than him, and Cat Eyes, who was yawning. Cat Eyes had it the hardest out of everyone. It was her turn to be on duty last night. Faced with a beauty, Xie Junping had to find something to say. "Where's Teacher Luo?" Xie Junping immediately understood. He's in seclusion again. Cat Eyes curled her lips. Nth time he pulled an all-nighter. Shui Lei defended her. "Sister Cat Eyes, didn't you say that he just received some important information last night?" "What information?" Xie Junping was very curious. Cat Eyes yawned again. "It seems to be a collection of theses written by his mother when she was alive. Senior Sister Qingwen's theses can be found in the school library and journal websites. It seems to be an unfinished work. It hasn't been officially published. It's the present he received from the meeting with Professor Pan last night." "No wonder." Xie Junping understood and expressed an optimistic attitude. "A few theses. They're unfinished. They won't take long. They're just mementos." Cat Eyes extended 4 fingers. 4 petabytes. Those documents are 4 petabytes in size. Xie Junping was smashed silly. 4 petabytes? With such a size, even the most realistic virtual reality documents would have hundreds to thousands of hours of playback time. Let alone ordinary words and pictures. Cat Eyes chuckled. He really sank in. When he comes out, this semester will be over. Xie Junping immediately cried out. Don't. The real-time check-in system is getting more and more perverted. 3 to 5 days is fine, but if he really is in seclusion for a long time, even if I bring out the headmaster, it won't work. Cat Eyes gave Xie Junping a rare pat on the shoulder. Might as well suspend him from school. I thought he was a little sober, but it turns out he's still in a daze. What a waste of breath. The beauty's intimate attitude made Xie Junping's brain heat up, and he couldn't control his mouth. That means you still haven't given me enough. In the next second, Xie Junping fell to the ground along with the chair. He was confused. This was the only drawback after becoming half an insider. Cat Eyes and the others knew that he was no longer a little newbie who would die with a single poke. They did not hold back when they attacked. It was a pity that he had not truly awakened yet. What would they do if something bad happened to him? Xie Junping was about to protest loudly when Jerry, who had just successfully stolen some snacks, happily stepped over his chest and used his face as a stepping stone to jump forward. F***ck unfilial son. Xie Junping spat twice and casually scooped up a leg instead of Jerry, who had maxed out his agility. Hey Nanster. Ignoring Xie Junping's sorry state, Jerry was quite excited. He tugged at the person's trousers and climbed up. In the blink of an eye, he scurried up to the person's chest. The person took advantage of the situation and pulled the muskrat into his embrace. Beautifully done. When Xie Junping heard these words, he simply wanted to use some strength to knock Luo Nan down. However, Luo Nan had already awakened. He relied on his fleshly body cultivation to take root beneath his feet. He was not someone a little newbie plus 1 level ability user could shake. Helpless, Xie Junping slapped the floor and grumbled as he struggled to get up. Cat Eyes was a bit baffled. You're in a pretty good mood? Luo Nan sat in front of the bar and revealed a smile to everyone. His smile was more persuasive than any words. Cat Eyes became even more baffled. Not even 8 hours had passed. He had just slept. No, this bro didn't sleep at all last night. How could a person's mood undergo such an earth-shattering change? Cat Eyes blinked and asked subconsciously, have you finished looking through all the information? Luo Nan picked up a snack and stuffed it into his mouth. He answered vaguely, how is that possible? There are so many. It would be hard to go through them in 2 or 3 years. Take your time. I'll look through them bit by bit. Don't overlook anything. Cat Eyes reached out to probe his forehead, but Luo Nan slapped her hand down in a bad mood. The group looked at each other in dismay. They had no idea where Luo Nan's appearance of great enlightenment came from. Actually, if the 2 first ablatums of the Blood Flame Order, who had been busy all night, were invited over, they would be able to obtain the correct answer very quickly. They might even be able to make further deductions. However, no one here was omniscient and omnipotent. Everyone could only console themselves. In any case, this was a good thing. Afterwards, the group gathered around the bar to eat breakfast. Or perhaps it could be said to be the dessert before the meal. The food that Xie Junping had casually bought was just enough to fill the gaps between the teeth of these ability users. The true breakfast was brought over by Qin Yikuan, who was responsible for taking over the shift. Compared to normal people, it was at least 10 servings. There was even a meticulously brewed medicinal porridge inside. It had extraordinary effects and was expensive. It was hard to buy it on the market. All of this had to be shared with the entire team. Only Luo Nan, a dog who got rich from teaching, could afford it. At least half of the reason why Xie Junping woke up early was because of this medicinal porridge. Not only did Qin Yikuan bring the breakfast porridge, he also brought the latest news. Yesterday, the Xia City military sent a letter. They wish to cooperate with the branch to develop new business. It should be related to the purification of the mental plane. Cat Eyes laughed in spite of herself. When did the military start managing propaganda? Are they trying to meddle with ideology? Are they trying to rebel? It's not a rebellion. I'm saying that it has nothing to do with ideology. Qin Yikuan was careless and let Cat Eyes fly away. He laughed bitterly and was about to explain when Luo Nan suddenly spoke up beside him. It's the scavenger. Yes, that's it. The cleansing and purification of illegal orders and black witchcraft in the Abyss region. It's to lower the rate of the so-called murder in the inner world. Qin Yikuan came to a realization after speaking. You know about it? Vice President, he mentioned it? No, Shang Bang said it last night. I bumped into him on the road. Luo Nan responded and didn't say anything else. Shui Lei, who had been eating with his head down, interrupted. He must have seen the use of the Blood Intent Ring's fortress. Last night, Brother Papercut and the others played with firecrackers the entire night. They had a lot of fun. Midnight even left a message in the group. She wants Nanster to develop some sail, thruster module, and a cannon and giant ship. Luo Nan grunted, I saw it too. I can give it a try later. The configuration is easy to talk about, but to turn it into a product, it will most likely take the form of a paper talisman. Chapter 634. Cat Eyes and Qin Yikuan knew very well that Luo Nan had recently been struggling with the configuration domain. Luo Nan's main direction of study was basic research, not applied development. Therefore, the research and development of the Blood Intent Ring and its surrounding products were no longer on Luo Nan's mind. He had to wait for Gao Meng and Papercut to come knocking on his door before he could discuss it. But in the end, this was still a matter of a single thought. If teacher Luo Nan was in a good mood, it wasn't a big deal for him to say a few more words. Cat Eyes just seized the opportunity to ridicule him. Qin Yikuan, Luo Nan, and the others all automatically skipped over her. Luo Nan was in a pretty good mood this morning. Next, he continued to explain the current situation of the Ring of Blood Wolf Fortress. The talisman cheat can only be a temporary product. If the fortress platform only needs 3 to 5 functions, it can still be of some use. Once the demand for functions increases, just thinking about how to distribute them will be troublesome. Cat Eyes made a teeth sound. It will definitely be troublesome on the society's side. But if it's on Tianbang's side, then it won't be a problem. Xianxia nodded in agreement. It's the military after all. Their organization is very strong. They definitely have the confidence. Xie Junping was amused by their conversation. He swallowed the hot porridge with great difficulty and chuckled. Every time we go on a mission we have to distribute weapons, equip ourselves, and then we have to hang talismans on them. Could it be that this is the legendary divine possession, the descent of heavenly soldiers? Perhaps the old methods of talismans are similar in nature. Shuelei was not superstitious, but he was keen on finding modern explanations for traditional projects. This was obviously due to his dojo background. Cat Eyes took the opportunity to combine similar items. This is Mr. Gao Daming's favorite topic. Oldyu has also researched this topic and has even published a thesis. In just a few sentences the topic had wandered off. This was a normal conversation. Everyone gathered around the bar and chatted aimlessly until the other students arrived one after another. They entered and left, and the private space was completely occupied. At this moment Ruiwen also arrived. The little girl had to eat breakfast at home to appease the elders. She left home a bit late today. There was less than 20 minutes before class started when she arrived at school. Even so, she still made a special trip to meet Luo Nan. Shuelei looked at his watch. Let's go. If we go now we'll be able to catch the train. Oh Nanster, we'll be together for the 3rd period in the morning. Do you need me to sign for you? Luo Nan laughed. I won't make things difficult for Director Xie. I'll go by myself. The group of people looked at each other. TSK, there is indeed a problem. As a senior student who was about to graduate, Xie Junping's schedule was much freer than that of middle school and high school students. He could sit paralyzed in his seat and press his stomach to digest the effects of the medicinal porridge, but his brain and mouth could not stay idle. He watched as Luo Nan and Shuelei entered the elevator. He smacked his lips, feeling rather baffled. This bro was just about to hire someone to hack the sign-in system. How come our teacher Luo was cured without even making a sound? Don't wimpy brats come and go for a while? Cat Eyes chuckled twice. She then greeted Xianxia and went home to catch up on her sleep. Xianxia stopped her with a wry smile. Wait, we went too far off topic just now. I almost forgot that Mr. Luo has a vote for the street sweeper. Now, he has a vote in any matter of the branch. Cat Eyes yawned. She was a bit impatient. You can just tell him directly. What does it have to do with me? But if Mr. Luo votes in favor and agrees to cooperate with the military, then it will be impossible. According to the relevant business requirements, he will be very busy for a period of time in the future. The corresponding security plans will need to be changed. Vice President, he hopes to communicate with us first. Cat Eyes raised an eyebrow. Are you sure that a certain person will agree? Yes, it really is possible based on the situation just now. But there's no need to look for me. I'm just being pulled in. I don't have much autonomy. You guys can discuss it and just notify me. Cat Eyes ignored Xianxia's bafflement and walked straight out of gear on the north bank. The cold morning wind blew the fresh air of the jungle in the plaza in front of her. It was quite pleasant. She ignored the sneaky or bold gazes of a group of teenagers and stretched her body to her heart's content. The sunlight permeated through the gaps between the branches and leaves, gently touching her cheeks. It slightly raised the temperature of her skin and made a corner of her heart inexplicably warm. Oh, it couldn't be considered inexplicable. Cat Eyes could roughly sense that this was due to certain elements that hadn't been frozen for a long time within Luo Nan's tightly sealed system. Felt pretty good, but why? Cat Eyes' doubts also existed in Shuelei's mind. During the 3rd morning class, Shuelei and Luo Nan sat together. The two of them didn't pay attention to what the teacher said on the podium. It must be said that Shuelei was an honest child. Normally, no matter how arduous his cultivation tasks were, he would listen to the class and complete the homework. He would earnestly complete all of them. And the reason why such a situation occurred today was because of Luo Nan's abnormal performance. He stared in a daze. Luo Nan's head hadn't been raised since the beginning of class. He opened up the split-page notebook that he always carried with him and placed it on the desk. He flipped it to the flexible e-ink screen page. The screen glowed with a lustrous radiance, forming a work area. A three-dimensional dynamic image file was being projected into the work area. The geometric structure displayed was very simple, and the projection effect was pretty good. It seemed to be rolling around in the palm of Luo Nan's hand, but he couldn't quite understand the markings on it. Luo Nan played this image file over and over again in the entire class, perhaps even the previous 2 classes. He played it over and over again without the slightest bit of boredom. Perhaps it was a configuration. Xuelei didn't really understand, so he could only make a blind guess. But the problem was, even if it was a configuration, what the hell was this state? From the side, the corner of Luo Nan's mouth was curled up. Sometimes he even unconsciously cracked open, letting out a chuckle. He was in a completely selfless state. Let alone Xuelei, even the students sitting to the side looked over from time to time. They were defeated by the ceaselessly rotating geometric structure time and time again. In the end, they gave up on understanding and used their gazes to classify Luo Nan as an abnormal person. In the beginning, Xuelei was cursing Luo Nan's mortal eyes. He couldn't recognize gods, Buddhas, immortals, and saints. But later he saw Luo Nan chuckle more and more often. Sometimes even his shoulders would shake. In the end, Xuelei was a bit flustered. Nanster? A what? Luo Nan shifted his attention in a very normal manner. His face was blank. Xuelei hiccuped a few times, but he still asked directly, "This diagram of yours is a configuration, right? What's so interesting about it?" "This is just a fragment. It doesn't have the meaning of a configuration," Luo Nan explained, but he lowered his head and laughed a few times as he spoke. Then Xuelei's ears trembled slightly. A message came from the psychic wave network. It was a recording that Luo Nan had shared with him. A woman's voice entered his ears. It was bright and clear. "Admit it. You're a negative number dregs in terms of configuration thinking. The more formulas you introduce, the more it proves that your thinking is chaotic." What followed was a man's rebuttal. It was unhurried and not slow, and it even carried a bit of an old-fashioned flavor. "Right now what we need is a complete model. It's mathematical thinking and not hand-drawn. Xuanhuan, don't squander your talent. A certain someone's talent for mimicry is max. It just so happens that it's long-range. Why don't you ask the teacher to give an evaluation?" Luo Nan propped his forehead with one hand to the side, burying his head in laughter. Xuelei didn't find the humor in this conversation, but the name mentioned made him flabbergasted. This is... Chapter 635. December 30th was a Sunday, the first day of the New Year's Day holiday. The flow of people on the streets soared again. The residents of the surrounding satellite cities also entered the main city area to spend their holidays. The exhaust exhaled by 200 million people raised the temperature of Xia City by 2 degrees, making the body feel more comfortable. Around the Shangding building and the surrounding high-rise buildings, the traffic on the guiding light track shuttled back and forth without beginning or end. Most of them were private cars, but there were also 100-jointed cars that had just been dismantled and landed on various platforms by the traction force. Zhang Yingying got out of a 100-jointed car and walked quickly into the Shangding building. When she climbed the stairs, she stepped on the last bit of red of the setting sun, adding a glazed luster to her white pencil pants and nude high heels, which attracted a lot of attention. But she didn't care about that. She raised her hand to look at her watch and sped up again. In the sound of her heels hitting the ground, she passed through the corridors of the interior floors of the building. After a lot of twists and turns, she finally arrived at the place. Conference room 1135. Done. After making sure that she arrived before the appointed time, Zhang Yingying breathed a sigh of relief, adjusted her breathing and pushed the door open. The circular conference room that could accommodate about 20 people was unexpectedly empty. There were only 3 or 4 people. Except for a staff member in charge of service, the rest were the same group. Not at the conference table, 2 bodyguards were sitting against the wall. At this time, they turned their heads and greeted her with a smile. "Yingying, you're here for a meeting?" "Big brother, Captain Gao." Zhang Yingying responded with the way she was used to, and then curled her lips. "His Majesty said he wouldn't come, but he only gave me half an hour to replace him. I climbed up from the bottom of the sea." While they were chatting, Zhang Yingying's eyes glanced at the young man at the conference table who was obviously a top perception master, but had no reaction to the changes in the outside world. Zhang Yingying gritted her teeth. "This guy." The 2 bodyguards laughed, but they had no intention of intervening. After the lecture on the 14th, in addition to the 2 concepts of cage and configuration that shook the world, the several bets that came before and after also painted the whole situation with a strange gossipy color. Many people in the inner world knew that the young genius, teacher Luo, had a beautiful female guard beside him who was extremely eloquent. She had insulted the senior B-class expert, Re, until she lost her composure and lost all face. As for Xia City, Zhang Yingying's favorable impression of Luo Nan was pretty much an open secret. It was just that Luo Nan, the main character and the core of this matter, didn't seem to have this awareness at all. This young man, who had just turned 16, seemed to always live in a dimension that was difficult for outsiders to understand. Sometimes he was depressed and sometimes he was in high spirits. He did not seek external help and had his own logic. Luo Nan was earnestly looking at his flexible e-ink screen. He used his finger to open a folder. This was his mother's research data, which he had transferred from Professor Pan's cloud space. The theme of the information was modern architectural design, but for 99% of the world's designers, it was tantamount to a book that they could never understand. In the folder that he had just opened, there were about 7 or 8 different kinds of documents, from the most primitive observation data to intuitive three-dimensional models, including the corresponding analysis and calculation. There were also some ideas that were written down on the spot, recordings of discussions and even videos left behind. These documents together formed a basic unit. It didn't revolve around design theories or cases, but rather a genuine basic configuration. It was just a fragment that had lost the meaning of the configuration. There were about 3,000 to 4,000 similar units. Together, they formed the accumulation of basic research data on the configuration. This was a gift from the heavens that Luo Nan didn't even dare to dream of. Mom must be watching me from the heavens. Luo Nan couldn't help but fantasize about these things. For the first time, he willingly crawled under the mighty power of fate, loudly praising it. He had once thought that since his mother was able to build a passageway that led to the clouds, she would certainly carry out explorations and research in that bizarre world. Thoughts were thoughts, but he never would have thought that the results of his mother's research were like a light boat crossing a specific path in the long river of time. They formed a predestined intersection with him, who had similarly chosen this path and was doing his best to row forward. The inheritance of fate was the highest reward for his 5 years of life and death struggle. Of course Luo Nan wouldn't forget. He was very grateful to Professor Pan who had created, or at least accelerated, this intersection. There was also Tian, and Tian, as well as all the people within this river of fate who had given him a boost. Hey, didn't you say that you were in a good mood? Why are you becoming more and more aloof? Zhang Yingying finally couldn't hold back. She slapped Luo Nan on the shoulder, announcing her existence. Luo Nan, who was wandering in the river of fate, was slapped onto the shore by Zhang Yingying's slap. He finally turned his head, but the side of his face met with an open lapel of a light-colored short-sleeved suit. He instinctively leaned back and saw a white-collared beauty with quite the intellectual and capable air. Zhang Yingying had one hand on the conference table. Her body leaned forward and she was very close. She cast a very direct gaze on Luo Nan's face. From Luo Nan's perspective, Zhang Yingying's clothes were more meaningful. This sort of outfit stirred up even more of his memories and emotions. Luo Nan still remembered that just 3 months ago, this was the same person who had disguised herself as a lawyer and boarded the ship that blocked the mountain. She continued to participate and push, making him willingly enter the water. She walked step by step into the deep water, all the way until he entered the river channel that belonged solely to him. She obtained the highest reward. So Luo Nan was very grateful to her. It could be said that he didn't forget his old kindness. Luo Nan couldn't help but laugh. I was just thinking about you. Zhang Yingying was a bit stupefied, but when she saw Luo Nan's expression she knew that she was thinking too much. Even so, she was still in a bit of a difficult situation for a short period of time. She didn't want to retreat and show weakness. She just subconsciously reached out to touch the flexible screen and opened a document in the folder. It was originally a meaningless action, but the complicated mathematical equations stung her eyes with a couple of glances. Do you understand these? Yeah, not really. Luo Nan was very honest. The information passed down by his mother was very detailed, but the level was also very high. Luo Nan still didn't understand some of the special algorithms involved. He probably needed to search for information or even learn the relevant knowledge on the spot. He would need to grind it down bit by bit. In these 2 days, Luo Nan specially selected recordings and videos to experience them one by one. He only skimmed through the rest of the information. He didn't read it in depth. Even so, he felt dizzy every time he looked at a few sets. It was hard for his mind to continue. Luo Nan laughed when he thought of this. What are you so happy about if you don't understand? Why can't I be happy if I don't understand? Fine. Luonan knew this. If it was the past, he would have been grinded to the point of insanity long ago. Just thoroughly understanding his mother's research data required a large amount of time. Uncovering the deeper mysteries of the cloud world was even more distant. Then killing Gongqi was placed behind these two in order. Wouldn't it be even more meaningless? Luonan should be anxious, but right now his mood was strangely tranquil and joyful. Every folder contained detailed and clear information. It recorded the process of his mother's research back in the day. Looking at the daily logs and records as well as the recordings and videos that appeared from time to time, was like learning and conversing with his mother. So Luonan knew. His mother's writing was clear, definite and concise. But when she scribbled and discussed, it was inevitable that she would hesitate and struggle. Sometimes she would even have a bit of a temper. When she encountered obstacles, she would promptly communicate with others in addition to researching on her own. Most of the time, it was in the form of brainstorming, letting many people participate. Among them were Professor Panwen, his grandfather, but most of them were that fellow. They discussed and even argued. They casually drew diagrams or more complex data formulas and so on. Luonan could understand some of them, but he couldn't understand some of them at all. But it didn't matter. He just quietly watched from the side. Every time this happened, his mood would be anxious and relaxed. He was like a glutton facing a delicacy. He wanted to swallow it clean in one gulp, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat it all. He could only taste it bit by bit. This feeling was strange, but it wasn't bad at all. Luonan chuckled. His laughter made Zhang Yingying's hair stand on end. And at this time, the door to the conference room was pushed open. A group of people came in one after another. Their gazes naturally focused on Luonan and Zhang Yingying. Some of them even revealed secretive smiles. TCH. Zhang Yingying didn't want to be gossip material. She also didn't feel the need to deliberately keep her distance. She immediately pulled out a chair and sat next to Luonan. The conference room was quickly filled with people. The last to enter was He Yuan. She was still dressed conservatively as an office lady. As the outsider, for today's conference, Tian Bang entered a second before He Yuan. He wore a military uniform that was rarely seen. The Major General's gold star on his shoulder made him look extremely sharp. But when he opened his mouth, he still had that relaxed and leisurely appearance. Oh, the protagonist has already arrived. His gaze fell directly on Luonan without the slightest bit of concealment. He Yuan didn't exchange pleasantries. She didn't speak nonsense. She just nodded slightly at Luonan after sitting down. She said, "Next we'll have a meeting. We'll discuss the specific matters related to the scavenger project." During yesterday's video conference, the branch team had already reached a consensus. They basically agreed to cooperate with Xia City's government, the garrison force, and the East Sea Military Theater. We'll push forward with the research and development of this project. We invited Major General Tian to this meeting today to ask him to introduce the background of the project in detail. We'll discuss the functional requirements of the project, the technical bottleneck, the research and development plan, and other issues. We'll strive to form a framework and implement it as soon as possible. Her gaze fell on Tian Bang after she finished speaking. Tian Bang understood. He grinned and took over the conversation. "Today I've come here to discuss the scavenger project. Of course it's the first priority. But before that, we can't avoid the convention. We still need to pay our respects." Chapter 636. Right now, the people seated in the conference room included a B-rank power like Gao Meng, the vice president, 2 veteran deputy secretaries, and several members of the technical team. Basically, half of the technical elites of the Xia City branch were here. They all heard Tian Bang's absolute explanation, but no one expressed any dissatisfaction. What was there to doubt? The government and the military had clearly come for Luonan's Bloodwill Ring Fortress. This was the cornerstone of the cooperation between the two sides. Without this, any other terms would be meaningless. Needless to say, the 1,000-person lecture on the 14th of this month had already established Luonan's authoritative position in the mental side. The Bloodwill Ring Fortress was anchored in the depths of the Abyss region. Over 90% of the people in the conference room would go there from time to time to experience and research. Right now there were quite a few people staring at Luonan with burning gazes. They wanted to find an opportunity to toss out all the doubts they had accumulated over the past few days, seeking a thorough understanding. Luonan did not know about these things, nor did he care. According to common sense, after Tian Bang's flattery, Luonan should have said a few polite words to complete the formalities. This was the custom of mutual business flattery. But Luonan did not react until Tianbang finished speaking. He just sat steadily in the middle of the conference room and raised his head, indicating that he was listening to him. That was all. Fortunately, no one raised too high a demand for Luonan's conduct, especially Tianbang himself. He had already experienced Luonan's apathy and dullness 2 nights ago, so he just laughed it off. Then he signaled to the staff to turn on the projection equipment and show the finished presentation to the participants. Of course, General Tian was a bit arrogant. He would not waste his breath explaining. The following introductions fell on the shoulders of his accompanying aide. Next, let me introduce the background of the project. The one who stood up to act as the speaker was Lieutenant Colonel Zhu Ling. This young soldier was also an old acquaintance of Luonan's. They had even eaten a meal together a few days ago because of the Thunder Falcon dojo. Zhu Ling was different from his own sloppy superior. He always had a serious and upright expression. His figure was ramrod straight like a soldier, and he naturally brought the atmosphere of the conference on the right track. Luonan was a bit distracted at this time. The situation before him made him think of the mutant infection incident that he and Peony had dealt with together. There was a time when he had attached his soul to ink and participated in this kind of briefing. It seemed to be much more interesting than this. Another important reason was that the background information provided by the military was nothing new. Although Luonan wasn't present at the voting site yesterday, he was able to get a basic understanding of the situation through Tianbang's prior communication. There weren't too many changes. Zhang Yingying, who was beside him, was a temporary helper who had been brought in when she was in seclusion. She didn't know much about the project, so she listened attentively at first. However, Zhang Yingying was in the most well-informed hidden indigo firm. Her accumulation of information was far from something a newbie like Luonan could compare with. She easily drew inferences about other cases from one case and understood the cause and effect. She lost interest and moved closer to Luonan to chat in a low voice. In the end, she was still able to keep up with today's main topic. The government and the military have finally found an opportunity. Luonan didn't refuse to whisper to his friend. He also wanted to hear Zhang Yingying's opinion. They have always disliked certain B-class experts and even transcendents from the inner world. I'm talking about the mental side. Especially people like Snake Tongue who dabble in curses and witchcraft. Of course, there are also those illegal orders. They play with all kinds of blood sacrifices and black masses. Every year, several thousand lives are involved in the inner world murders. They want to control them, but they can't. They can't get any benefits either. Of course, they hate them to the bone. Zhang Yingying's explanation was very close to Tianbang's, excluding a few subjective descriptions. She chuckled as she spoke. On the side of the government and the military, Old Gao and the others. Oh, and you as well. They are all criminals engaged in illegal construction. It's just that right now they're thinking of enlistment. Illegal construction. I don't think it counts. The Abyss region is more appropriate to call it a land outside of the law or a wilderness of the vast sea. Yes, Mr. Pioneer Luonan. In the ability system of the society, the code name of a B-class expert was architect. Some people say it was engineer, but the former was more appropriate. Of course, the fleshly body could be used as well. It wouldn't be wrong to say that the structure of the body and soul was constructed. However, the earliest source of this name was the so-called Abyss region architect. It referred to the mental side building their own house in the Abyss region. Everyone had an intuitive understanding of the vile environment of the Abyss region after the appearance of the fortress. It was absolutely not an easy task to complete the construction of structures there. Even a veteran B-class expert like Gao Meng could only plant simple structures such as the spirit glyph for a short period of time. They couldn't withstand the wind and rain for long periods of time. Even more amazing characters were able to retain some seeds and frames, and then construct more complex structures on top of them. Only transcendents were able to construct semi-permanent structures, forming all sorts of inconceivable effects. Reaching this step, one could already be called a god, according to the words of the various orders. Reaching this step, the so-called religious altar residents could already borrow the berserk and inexhaustible power of the Abyss region. Its level and intensity far exceeded the limits of humans, forming a virtuous cycle. But how many transcendents were there in the world? Constructing structures in the Abyss region was so difficult. It was inevitable that some people would come up with crooked ideas. They would forcefully seize a person's essence energy, stimulate a mortal's heart, extract soul strength through black witchcraft, evil sacrifices and so on. These were the most common methods. There were also dark-sided life forms like the human-faced arachnid. There were also some mutants that possessed special abilities. They were born to stir up trouble in the Abyss region. Due to the special nature of this level, the effects were enormous. Some of them were even vile. This caused the already dangerous and complex Abyss region to become even more foul. Looking at it from this angle, the work of scavengers was indeed necessary. The guide Zhu Ling just so happened to transform the relevant statistical data into an intuitive pie chart. He talked about how many types of illegal constructions were in the Abyss region. He talked about how much direct damage was caused. He talked about how much trouble would radiate to the traditional 3 belts on the mental plane and so on. Of course, he also talked about the benefits that would be brought to everyone's cultivation and lives after the governance was perfected. In short, he acted as if he had ample reasons and was worthy of trust. Gao Meng, who sat across from Luo Nan, let out a yawn. He was also one of the people who voted last night. He really wasn't interested in these official articles. He squinted his eyes to see Luo Nan and Zhang Yingying chatting happily. Then he thought about how he didn't stop Luo Nan last night. He felt a bit unbalanced in his mind. He knocked on the table. Chapter 637. Gao Ming's words were crude, but his reasoning was not crude. The background and significance of the project could be explained to the heavens, but in the end, it all came down to practicality. The scavenger project had to be guided by technology. No matter how perfect the other ideas were, they were meaningless if they were impractical in terms of technology. Zhu Ling didn't mind his own explanation being interrupted. Instead, he took advantage of the situation to cut into the specific technical link. According to the collected data and user feedback, the functionality of the fortress is quite simple and crude. It's like a fixed fort. It only has 2 basic attributes, defense and attack. If it wants to truly display its usefulness, this fort must possess mobility, probing, and other functions. Therefore, we hope that the project team can combine the Blood Will bracelet product and develop a few basic elements of a paper talisman plugin in a short amount of time. Then we can coordinate and perfect it. Luo Nan raised his head. So it's just a temporary product, right? No. This is a long-term project. The government and the military's idea is to use the fortress as a large functional platform. We believe that it possesses this kind of potential. But there's a problem with your train of thought. Luo Nan raised his head. His gaze swept across Gao Meng, Zhu Ling, and even Tian Bang and He Yuan's faces. He shook his head and said, "The direct cause of the crude functionality of the fortress is the crude functionality of the Blood Will bracelet. The design of the paper talisman plugin is cumbersome. After all, they are only transitional products. They are temporary crutches that can't be borrowed. If we were to talk about the root cause, it would still be the lack of the participants' configuration thinking and skills. In other words, it's a fundamental problem." Luo Nan mercilessly criticized the product his own company had launched. He conveniently swept everyone in. He spoke bluntly under the subtle expressions of the group of people. If a hardware plugin is needed to realize a function, then this system platform is trash. The fortress can have hardware, but it can't be this kind of hardware. The fortress itself isn't that bad. It's just the current application model that's bad. Zhang Yingying giggled to the side. Luo Nan was baffled. What's wrong? Nothing. Honest boy, fight. Zhang Yingying clenched her fists and waved her arms, encouraging him. Quite a few people blinked from the sourness that assaulted their faces. Although he was the instigator of the situation, Gao Meng revealed the true face of the most enthusiastic fortress fan. He immediately got into the zone and asked anxiously, "What's the best way to use it?" Luo Nan thought for a bit and said, "In an ideal state. What I mean is, under the impetus of complete configuration thinking and skill, the fortress should be like a giant ship roaming the universe. There should be hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of crew members inside. Together they formed a group consciousness, but there was a clear division of labor. Everyone cooperated and performed their own duties. Their posts, functions, configurations, and operations were all unified. The crew of a bastion ship are the architects and operators of the ship. They use their thinking and technology to create the necessary configurations. These configurations must conform to the logic of the bastion platform, as well as the characteristics of the ship's own soul. Not only could it realize the effective integration of collective strength, but it could also increase the adaptability of the platform as much as possible and raise the upper limit of the platform. If necessary, the fortress platform on the mental plane needs to be unified with the equipment platform on the material plane. It's like the Deep Blue Walker's formatting domain. That should be a variant of the abyssal region configuration. It can be effectively combined with the mechanical combat platform and the operator, truly forming a mutual interference between the mental and the material. It is a combat platform that straddles the two domains. Luo Nanyang spoke eloquently. In the beginning, there were people in the meeting room who were whispering to each other and exchanging glances. But later on, everyone shut their mouths and stared at him. Aside from Luo Nan's speech, there was not the slightest noise in the meeting room. Only when Luo Nan's voice fell did Gao Meng loudly applaud. This train of thought is beautiful. It sounds like everything is right in front of your eyes. You've been thinking like this for a long time. It really was right in front of their eyes. This was because what Luo Nan had described truly existed in the alien civilization related to the external neuron. In the initial interface of the virtual brain system, there were two satellites orbiting around the virtual brain. One of them was an exoskeleton armor, which represented the development system of an individual. The other was a spacecraft in outer space, which represented the application of collective power. Luo Nan had more or less straightened out the logic within through this period of analysis and study. His train of thought naturally became clearer and more intuitive. It's truly marvelous. It even makes people believe that Mr. Luo has seen a scene that truly exists. This is the foresight of wisdom. Tian Bang lightly clapped his hands from the far end of the long table. His words sounded similar to Gao Meng's at first glance, but there was a bit of a different flavor in the transition of the syllables. Yuan gave him an ice-cold glance because of this. Tian Bang was thick-skinned. He didn't even blink. But then he changed the topic to another aspect. We are more at ease now that we understand Mr. Luo's train of thought. Letting Mr. Luo become the chief technical officer of the scavenger project is truly the most appropriate choice. Zhang Yingying asked curiously, Chief Technical Officer? Yes. According to the usual practice of civil-military cooperation projects, the military is willing to provide a certain amount of remuneration and technical shares to employ Mr. Luo as the chief technical officer of the project. If Mr. Luo is willing, we can also provide an official title and engage in a longer and more intimate cooperation. Oh. Luo Nan responded casually. Tian Bang had said similar words yesterday during the remote vote. Now he repeated it again. It was like taking off one's pants to fart. It was an unnecessary move. Though the Blood Intent Ring Fortress was not Luo Nan's original invention, he was probably the only person on Earth right now who truly understood the marvels within, excluding a certain person whose whereabouts were unknown. There was no need to talk about this in Xia City. Unless President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu relied on their seniority to interfere, no one could occupy this position. Since he had agreed he had to do things. Luo Nan had a basic train of thought. He was operating on the flexible e-ink screen when he felt the gazes of all the participants. The natural noise had all disappeared. Zhang Yingying's elbow resting on the table came over. You want to enter the system? Only now did Luo Nan discover that everyone's focus was different. He was only thinking about the first half, but everyone else was thinking about the second half. The second half. Oh, that's what I mean. Luo Nan's uncle Mo Haihang was a high-level employee of the SCA. Luo Nan had some concept of the situation of the public sector. Tian Bang was talking about titles and not positions. This meant that if Luo Nan nodded, he could enter the military and government public sector and become a public employee. He could enjoy the most stable social benefits, but of course he would be restrained by the entire public sector. He was not interested in this at all. Let's talk about titles and whatnot later. It's too troublesome. I don't want people to manage me. The breathing noises in the conference room returned to normal after hearing Luo Nan say this. The group of people all laughed. It had to be said that Luo Nan's current way of thinking was quite in line with his age. They were all laughing, but there were subtle differences between members of the military, members of the society, and even different people. Luo Nan didn't pay attention to these things. It was just as he said before. The fortress was still far from complete. He needed to expend a considerable amount of energy to supplement and amend it. Defense, attack, movement, and detection. There were 4 basic elements in total. Not only did he need to perfect them one by one, he needed to form a complete system. Even if he could find mature and complete examples in the user manual and the virtual brain system, the original design would not be suitable due to the difference in the user's basic abilities. It wasn't something that could be done in a day or two or even a month or two. Luo Nan operated on the flexible e-ink screen. The first thing he opened was the calendar and the corresponding work schedule. Zhang Yingying moved closer to take a look. She saw that the schedule was at least half a year later. She couldn't help clicking her tongue twice. Luo Nan ignored her this time. He considered how he should insert the research and improvement work of the Blood Intent Ring Fortress into the process of learning the external neuron configuration theory, researching his mother's thesis, and collecting and analyzing the cloud configuration fragments. Well, from this angle, the transformation of the fortress, the construction of the Blood Soul Temple thousands of kilometers away, and even the specific actions of killing Gong Chi in the cloud world were all considered exercises in the process of learning and research. And when he considered the difficulty, the transformation of the fortress seemed to be relatively simple. It was just right for a beginner like him. Luo Nan's last bit of apprehension was dispelled after he incorporated the mission into his own logical system. He immediately began to modify the schedule. He pondered about it for a while and said, "I need to equip a team." Tian Bang, He Yuan, and the others were discussing the specific issues of cooperation right now. However, the information that Luo Nan inserted was still the first priority. Tian Bang responded in the first instance, "Of course." Luo Nan wasn't going to be polite with him. Professionals can supplement depending on the needs. This includes but is not limited to mental side charms, perception, realization, mathematical modeling, mechanical design and manufacturing, material science. Oh, this includes laboratory production lines. Tian Bang chuckled, "You're the CTO. Research and development revolves around you. As long as the circuits don't go out of line, the demand doesn't exceed, and the output is uninterrupted, you can have whatever you want." Zhang Yingyin curled her lips. Nonsense. Luo Nan was quite content with this before he was certain of a problem. He didn't say anything else. And at this time, someone from the society raised a question. It was directed at Tian Bang. "I have a question. If the reconstruction of the fortress is completed, its performance will be as expected. Then is there a clear direction for the goal? Is it to be pulled into the wilderness to fight against the mutants and Darksider races? Or is there some other plan? I feel that the government and the military don't have a clear arrangement in this regard." The person who spoke could be considered an acquaintance of Luo Nan's. It was another B-rank mental side psychic, Mr. Bai. His daughter was the mysterious and treacherous Bai Xinyan, who was hard to distinguish between friend and foe. Tian Bang maintained his smile in response to Mr. Bai's inquiry. "Even though I have confidence in Mr. Luo's talent and strength, it isn't a safe choice to go face-to-face with a monster like the human-faced arachnid when you've just set foot in this brand-new domain. I am willing to suggest that we first apply this epic-making platform to Xia City's own defense and public security. First, we'll eliminate a few small problems and troubles. We'll continue to accumulate experience and plan for the future." Mr. Bai continued to question, "What are small problems and troubles? As long as the abyssal region is involved, it seems that there is no room for small fish and shrimps to interfere. I don't know if we can catch small fish and shrimps in the abyssal region. However, there are some people whose ambitions and desires have climbed too high before their abilities are sufficient. There are many such people. Xia City is no exception." Tian Bang gave Zhu Ling a meaningful glance. Zhu Ling understood and switched to the screen of the presentation. Soon, a circular interface that was pieced together from hundreds and thousands of garbled symbols appeared. "This is an invitation to some absurd event. Tomorrow night is New Year's Eve. It should be about time. Is there anyone here who has received the latest information?" A buzzing vibration sounded just as Luo Nan's voice fell. Though it was small and weak, it could not hide from the eyes and ears of the group of ability users in the conference room. Luo Nan was carrying out the initial details of the plan when he felt his wrist vibrate. His gaze shifted and he saw the virtual screen of his wristband appear. The garbled dial on it was extremely eye-catching. It was no different from what was displayed on the screen of the presentation. Chapter 638. Crown, abandon the perfect position. Like this, quickly turn back time. Deliberately bumping into each other will attract others to look around. The wine will help me lie. Crown, ugliness will eventually disappear. So you decide the direction. Deliberately colliding, pretending to be destined to be destroyed, and the mournful cries of samsara will no longer echo. Hoo-hoo, no more echoes. Amidst the toxic melody, the lights, the sound, the screams, and of course the most important thing was still the handsome and charming singing and dancing. This caused the small square stage that was temporarily set up to enter a serial explosion mode. Crown, shuiyuan. This way, doll. You decide the direction. Barbie dominates me. Oh my god, is this still that 18th tier girl group? Luo Nan stood behind a layer of barriers on the stage. He was no longer in the best position, but he was able to fully experience the explosive atmosphere of the scene. Who would have thought that the BHD girl group, which had always been pure and cute, would have such a strong reaction after playing a little sex appeal? Crown, crown, xuanhuan. My queen of the snow garden. Bamboo Pole, this newly promoted B-class ability user of unknown age, waved his arms with all his might. Like the young men and women below, he gasped in admiration and even screamed, completely ignoring the sidelong glances of his peers and non-peers. Papercut covered his face. He couldn't bear to watch. But when they looked further, Octopus, who was a medical worker, was also twisting his hips to show off his extraordinary sense of rhythm. It was as if he was on drugs. Since he was already in such a state, the joint investigation tonight had to be temporarily suspended. Sure enough, it's just as Brother Hai Jing said. It's more suitable for small venues. Luo Nan simply propped his elbow against the railing. He enjoyed this visual feast with a clear conscience. He never imagined that a naive person like Baiyu would wear a suit, wear sharp eyeliner and maintain a cold expression while dancing. He almost didn't dare to admit it. There was an indescribable sexiness to it. Oh, speaking of which, I seem to have exposed something? Luo Nan subconsciously turned his face away. His line of sight cut through the entire region below. The BHD troops' small stage performance was part of Xia City's New Year's Eve celebration. Yep, a small part. To be precise, their performance was part of the small stage of the Flowing Water Group in Xia City's New Year's Eve event. While the song Crown was being played, at least a dozen similar performances were being performed in various areas of Cloud City Water Village. The leader was a middle-aged man in his 50s or 60s. He was a bit plump, and his clothes could be considered decent. But from his eyes to his teeth, he revealed the various colors of society. Right now, his eyes were fixed on Zhang Yingying's back. She was leaning against the railing, making people very suspicious. He was about to reach out with his hand in the next moment. And then he would be dead for sure. Perhaps it was Luo Nan's gaze that alerted him. The middle-aged man finally turned his eyes and met Luo Nan's gaze. Clearly, he didn't expect Luo Nan to be this young. His gaze was also this cold. His expression was a bit stiff. But when he glanced at Luo Nan again, he saw the flickering Majabake dial on Luo Nan's wrist. He relaxed and laughed. Little bro, are you coming along? What was that be again? It's a high-quality girl group. It's possible to get one, but it's a bit difficult to get all of them. Everyone can work together for a bit. Before he could finish speaking, his companion next to him went, "Oh no. Brother Zhou, this group isn't on the list." The middle-aged man, Brother Zhou, chuckled. It's just a trick the organizers use to lure people. Since they're here, what's there to worry about? There's a manual marking function on the system. Just spend a few more points. As he spoke, he raised his wrist and aimed at the BHD group on the stage. Just as he was about to operate, Luo Nan happened to turn around and take a step to the side, blocking the miniature lens. Brother Zhou went, "Huh? Make way, little bro." Luo Nan completely ignored him. No matter what, Brother Zhou was still a person with a reputation. He couldn't eat a loss in front of his friend. His expression turned quite ugly. "Little bro, let me tell you this. In this situation, eating alone is the most childish behavior." Clap, clap, clap. Luo Nan still didn't turn his head. He just clapped his hands. "Okay, stop looking. Let's talk business." "What?" Chapter 639. As a big client who could attend the banquet, Brother Zhou and Boss Zhou naturally had bodyguards. However, the overwhelming disadvantage in numbers was enough to make any professional bodyguard lose the courage to confront them head-on. 5 meters away, the bodyguards hired with a lot of money were quite professional, and they were trying their best to squeeze in. However, any one of the audience in front of them was blocked by the big bodyguard, who had a strong physique, and it was difficult for him to move forward. For a few seconds, Boss Zhou thought he was going to be beaten up. He was not stupid, and he immediately activated the help function on the dial. This was the promise of the organizing committee for the safety of the guests. However, to his surprise, the audience did not pay much attention to him. 2 or 3 seconds later, under the call of the young man who still looked like a child, they continued to gather there. Naturally, Brother Zhou and the others were kept outside the circle. The young man's voice came from the center of the circle. A meaningful configuration must have a material foundation. Simple. Switching circuits can be done with a little guidance. Complicated ones need to be converted. The noise around the stage interfered with the voice transmission. The intermittent sentences also made Boss Zo, his companions and his bodyguards confused. They did not know what these people were doing. They were obviously VIPs of the banquet, but they wanted to have a class in such a fun place. Was there something wrong with their brains? But this was also good. They were all people with families and businesses, and they were all here to have fun. No one wanted to have a conflict because of something inexplicable. Boss Zo gave his bodyguard a look and the latter understood. Now that there was no obstacle, he came over to cover him and cut off the audience as much as possible. They retreated along the inside of the corridor, trying to leave this place of trouble. At this time, the service staff of the banquet contacted Brother Zo through the communication device. Chairman Zo, we have locked on to your position and ensured that you are under surveillance. Your personal butler will arrive in 1 minute to deal with the relevant matters. Yes. Boss Zo heaved a sigh of relief, but he also felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he would have brought his personal butler with him. He should not have despised the butler just because he was a middle-aged man about his age. If the butler had been with him just now, at least there would have been a buffer. Even though there would be people coming to deal with the dangerous situation soon, Boss Zo and his group were not willing to wait around. While those people were focused on the lesson, they continued to retreat. Right at this moment, when the two performances were intersecting, the surrounding noises dropped a lot. In the middle of the crowd, the youth's voice also became clear. Basically, conversion is still necessary. In terms of the composition of the spiritual plane, those that did not enter the abyss were mostly turbid streams. The soul energy of an ability user and a normal person is essentially the same under normal circumstances. Damn, he's a fraud. Mr. Zo was a well-known figure in Xia City and a frequent customer of the Starry Sky Club. He was quite knowledgeable. He immediately classified Luo Nan in his mind. There was no way to reason with this nagging fellow. A wise man knew better than to fight when the odds were against him. If he couldn't afford to provoke him, then why couldn't he hide? Just at this moment, the voice of the young faker rang in his ears again. He seemed to be giving an example. Just like us and the few over there, it's not so easy to distinguish between us at the low-end spiritual level. Boss Zo suddenly felt his scalp tingle. He saw that group of dangerous people all turn their heads, their sharp eyes focused on his face. *CKME. Boss Zo was pinned down by over 20 gazes. Not a single one of these people seemed to be good people. Even though there were bodyguards in front of him, it was as if Boss Zo had been impaled into a wall. His entire body froze in place, unable to move a single step. Only his bladder instinctively contracted and expanded. Where's the housekeeper? Why hasn't his personal housekeeper arrived yet? Excuse me. Hurried footsteps rang out from the other end of the corridor. For a second, Boss Zo practically believed that his personal housekeeper had arrived. But then he realized that it was really hard for a middle-aged man of his age to have such a clear and sweet-sounding female voice. A group of people appeared in the corridor as the voice rang out. 3 of them had stage makeup on, and they all wore the same black long women's suits. They completely covered their shorts, exposing their snow-white long legs. Without a doubt, this was the BHD girl group that had just performed on the small stage with great success. The 3 beautiful girls were dripping with sweat due to the high intensity of the dance. Clara, who had a slightly weaker body, had her hair wet. But their already excellent skin quality seemed to reflect a layer of jade light. It was extremely dazzling. And this made things difficult for the stylist, who needed to quickly touch up their makeup. He walked backwards the entire way, completely unaware of the dense mass of people behind him. Baiyu had called out to him early on. She called out to him to pay attention as she passed. Oh, Xuanhuan's life. This is undoubtedly a meeting of fate. Whether he was a true fan or just joining in on the fun, Bamboo Pole was quite engrossed in his role. He saw the BHD trio walk over quickly, and after sighing with emotion in an aria style, he wanted to rush over and ask for an autograph. But just as he took half a step, Luo Nan grabbed him by the arm. Didn't you hear that we need to make way? As a junior in the entertainment world, BHD had a very heavy task to perform tonight. They needed to endlessly switch between various small stages. They really didn't have a chance to catch their breath. This corridor was specially designated by the authorities to be a fast and convenient passageway for actors and actresses to quickly switch between stages. Of course, the appearance of Boss Zo and the others, including Luo Nan, proved that the organizers had some hidden plans. Luo Nan didn't want to delay the work of the BHD trio, but he underestimated his position in the hearts of this small girl group. Huh? Shredded radish? Mr. Luo? Boss? The three beautiful girls all addressed him differently, but their attention was all focused on Luo Nan. Their nearly jogging footsteps all came to a stop. This kind of reaction made Boss So, who was behind the crowd, suddenly realize something. So it was like, don't delay. Do your best. Following Luo Nan's words, the dense mass of people in front of them all moved back under Luo Nan's command. The corridor wasn't wide enough for BHD and their team to quickly pass through. Even though there were no compliments, this kind of action and this kind of effect was enough to satisfy the vanity of these girls. Under Xuanhuan's lead, the three girls all bowed in thanks. This way the little meeting seemed to be coming to an end. But Baiyu was still a bit unwilling to give up. She had already run 2 steps when she turned around and asked, "What did you think just now?" Bamboo pole, octopus's whistle and Zhang Yingying's snort mixed together. Luo Nan's mind was in a mess. He subconsciously spat out a word that left a deep impression on him: beauty leg. Baiyu staggered and turned halfway around. Her snow-white and smooth thighs tightened, nearly giving Luo Nan a knee strike. But in the end she put one hand on her forehead and bent one leg slightly. She borrowed her excitement to quickly strike a photogenic pose. "I think so too. You have a good eye." In the end the young girl couldn't hold it in any longer. Her face turned red. Luckily her stage makeup was quite thick and she used a smile to cover it up. She turned around and ran away giggling and laughing. When she met up with her companions, one of them smacked the back of her head and the other smacked the buttocks. She was severely punished. All she could do was cry out. The members of BHD, who were currently enjoying the most glorious moment of their acting careers, obviously didn't know that there were a few pitiful bugs behind the courteous audience and fans on one side of the corridor. Their eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. They looked like a bunch of half-dead fish. "Don't give me an opportunity. Aya?" Boss Zou's internal spasms had already affected his stomach function. At this moment, in his blurry vision, a middle-aged man in a classic black suit with a bow tie quietly appeared. This man was none other than Boss Zou's personal butler. The two had met before when Boss Zou had entered the venue. It was just that Boss Zou's brain had been fried back then. He believed himself to be an old player and wanted to do something a bit more exciting, so he refused this service. No. It wasn't too late. Boss Zou struggled to speak, but before he could straighten his tongue, he saw his personal butler use impeccable etiquette to bow to the young psychic. It couldn't be considered flattery, but it was a clear and direct choice based on courtesy. It caused Boss Zou's face to suffer an incorporeal blow. The pain was so great that it suppressed the diffuse internal spasms. The personal butler spoke respectfully, "Mr. Luo, we are very sorry that such an unpleasant matter has occurred." "Oh, it's nothing." Luo Nan swept a glance at Boss Zou, who was stuck to the wall. He confirmed once more, "There's nothing unpleasant." Strangely enough, when Boss Zou made eye contact with Luo Nan once more, the restlessness that filled his heart and lungs, as well as the rage that rushed to the top of his head, seemed to have been forcefully stuffed into a freezer. It rapidly cooled and froze. Then his reason returned. He used the most basic knowledge of social relations and basic thinking to quickly piece together a logical chain. The organizer of the grand banquet was the LCRF, the famous Life Cycle Research Fund. Specifically, it was organized by Cloud City Water Village and coordinated by the Starry Sky Club. This kind of power was completely unstoppable in Xia City, not to mention the entire Earth. However, the staff of the organizer would rather offend a major client like him in order to display sufficient politeness and humility in front of the young psychic. Wasn't the truth clear enough? Boss Zou shivered. A person's perception was always particularly sharp at times like this. So he could faintly sense that his rather clever gang of scoundrels had a similar reaction. Then the young psychic shot him a glance at this time. No emotion could be seen in his eyes, but the more it was like this, the more Boss Zou found it unbearable. He even felt as if his internal organs had been hollowed out. Only the cold energy known as fear grew from within the black hole, spreading layer by layer. His personal butler was a smooth and slick person, but he was truly unable to make an accurate judgment when faced with this seemingly innocent young man before him. He paused for 2 seconds and could only ask probingly, "Mr. Luo, if you don't mind, I'll take these people?" Chapter 640. Compared to mature language and vocabulary, the ability of human body movements to convey information was far too vague. In this current situation, Luo Nan's simple action of raising his hand could be interpreted in a positive way as, "I got it," or, do whatever you want. It could also be interpreted as you shut up, or don't be noisy. No matter how smooth and slick the butler was, he didn't dare to make a rash judgment. As for Boss Zhou and the others by the wall, the thumping of their hearts could practically drown out the dynamic music that had just sounded around the stage. Let's continue. Luonan raised his hand. He just had the project team members who had just given way come over and discuss again. Boss Zhou looked at the screen of people blocking the young psychic. It was as if he had just woken up from a nightmare. His legs went soft and he sat against the wall. A bodyguard grabbed him halfway. The butler squeezed out of the crowd at this time and came over to support him. Right now, Boss Zhou had long since forgotten his previous anger. There was only one thought in his mind and he spoke it out loud. Let's hurry up and leave. No one had any objections, but their fate tonight was destined to be filled with twists and turns. Boss Zhou's voice hadn't even fallen when Luonan's voice lingered in their ears like a lingering nether spirit. If there are no problems with the information, then there really are people who have established relevant illegal configurations through this event. Then the participants, the large number of tourists in Cloud City Water Village who don't know anything, are all targets that can be used. The people beside us are all participants. In an ideal situation, no matter how useful they should occupy a certain position in the illegal configurations. Boss Zhou didn't understand at least half of Luonan's words, but he was able to understand the most critical part. Clearly this matter wasn't over yet. Things were already like this, so he couldn't care about anything else. His words of defense blurted out. He was even faster than the gazes of everyone else. The butler's face was a bit stiff. He turned his head to speak, but all he saw was a group of people forming a human wall. Luonan didn't pay any attention to the noise outside the wall. He took the opportunity to ask a question. Where are they inside? In other words, if you are the designers, how should you use them most appropriately? You can talk about your own views. None of the project team members spoke. They just looked at each other. In the end, Bamboo Pole grinned with a bitter smile. Hold on. Your course is progressing too quickly. We're still learning the basics. It's not like you want us to do independent design. Luonan shook his head. Learning the basics requires a basic train of thought, and this train of thought is extremely simple. As I said earlier, any mental construct must have a material foundation. Maybe we don't know what those illegal configurations are, but we can definitely come into contact with some of them. Which one? Bamboo Pole asked on behalf of the other members of the project team. The structure of the human body and soul. Luonan casually waved his hand, taking the people in front of him into consideration. I remember saying that in a broad sense, the structure of a person's body and soul is also a type of configuration. Although the efficiency was a bit low, especially on the mental plane, its material foundation gave soul power a characteristic that was hard to change. The structure of inheritance and evolution over thousands of generations had a certain determinism. The material foundation of the human body determines that our bodies of flesh and blood are not as stable as steel or computer programs. There is bound to be a process of ups and downs. The majority of people under normal circumstances do not have a clear direction in their mental activities. The corresponding power flows, disperses, and transforms. Under these circumstances, soul power is like a container riddled with holes. In theory, it is necessary to seal off all other exits in order to allow it to effectively accumulate and operate. Only a single flow of power is given to this power. Cultivators guard their minds internally. Essence is the only one. This is probably the implementation of similar principles. Luonan's words were like words spoken on the side of the road to the elites of the project team present. However, some words needed to be said in the context and the identity of the speaker. The members of the project team all listened earnestly. No one, at least on the surface, showed any impatient emotions. There were even some people who tried to follow Luonan's train of thought. A young military researcher said, "Teacher Luo, what you mean is that the turbid flow on the mental plane is similar to ineffective waste heat. And in order to form an effective configuration, efficient rules and constraints must be formed. We need to find these rules." No, it should be to find the exit that forms the configuration rules. Zhang Yingying reminded Luonan of the identity of this military researcher. Xianxia. Apparently he has worked in AB team before. Luonan nodded slightly. He was expressing affirmation towards Zhang Yingying's intelligence and Xianxia's train of thought. The exit needs to be singular, but the choice of exit is flexible. The human mind has many layers and changes. High-level ideals and beliefs are fine. Low-level emotions and desires are also fine. You still need to make a judgment based on the actual situation. Take today for example. If this New Year's Eve event is indeed a deliberately created environment, then what is the most appropriate choice? Someone else answered before xianxia could speak. Of course, it's low-level emotions and desires. Luonan shook his head. Too crude. Human emotions are complex. The structure of the human body itself is a chaotic system. The brain regions and neurotransmitters involved in nearly every emotion are different. Conversely, the brain regions and neurotransmitter conduction bring about changes in emotions. The relationship between brain regions and neurotransmitter conduction isn't one-to-one. As a designer, as long as the conditions are met, you can randomly choose an exit. You can have over 10 different solutions. The starting point can be located anywhere in the 3 zones, not to mention the labyrinth of the abyssal region. Luonan's denial made the majority of people afraid to open their mouths. Instead, xianxia muttered to himself, in order to crack this design, the fortress must focus on strengthening the detection and sensing module. It involves many layers and many angles. It seems that attack, defense, movement and detection are the most important of the 4 basic modules. Does Teacher Luo mean to say that this is the focus of our next step of work? Researcher sure is worthy of being from the AB team. Bamboo Pole clapped his hands on Luonan's head and laughed. Searching and fighting as one should be the mental side's inclination and advantage. This direction is certainly not a problem. And speaking from a practical point of view, detection and identification is indeed the #1 priority when it comes to catching illegal configurations. Most people came to a sudden realization at this time. Today Luonan didn't just come to scout and teach. He also came to determine the project team's progress plan. Perhaps he also had the idea of observing and promoting talents. Didn't that xianxia just pop up? For a time, there were those who came to a sudden realization, those who wrung their hands and those who were envious. Even though the military and political departments dispatched elites with excellent qualities, the subtleties of human nature were not factors that could be completely controlled in the end. Luonan remained silent after Bamboo Pole opened his mouth. He just quietly sized up the turbid flow that flowed around him, distinguishing the color changes within. Actually, he had never thought of things in such a complicated way, but letting others think in such a complicated way was a pretty good method. Letting Bamboo Pole worry about it was also pretty good. Brother Bamboo Pole, can I express a bit of a different opinion regarding the word illegal? Suddenly a female voice cut in. The voice carried a smile that was yet not a smile at the end. It sounded intimate but the content was thorny. A group of people walked over with quick steps from one end of the corridor as the voice spoke. Leading the group was a middle-aged woman with short hair and a neat temperament. Luonan had seen her before. She was the manager of the Starry Sky Club's restaurant department. She was also a good friend of Bamboo Pole, Sun Jai. Luonan didn't have any ill feelings toward Sun Jai. He saw this neat woman approach him with a few steps, and he indicated for the surrounding people to make way for her. Sun Jai called out to Bamboo Pole from afar, but she was the first to bow to Luonan when she got closer. Her attitude was extremely low. Teacher Luo, sorry to disturb your lesson. This low attitude just happened to complement the thorny attitude of Bamboo Pole. Overall, she was neither servile nor overbearing. Luonan gave a slight smile in response. He knew himself well enough to deal with such a shrewd, capable and worldly person. He wouldn't forcefully stick his head out, so he let Bamboo Pole deal with her. Bamboo Pole didn't regard himself as an outsider. He laughed and spread his arms open to welcome her. Oh my, this bro's business is expanding really fast. No wonder you look radiant and overflowing with spring. Sun Jai giggled as she gave him a light hug. She spoke into his ear in a voice that the surrounding people could clearly recognize. No matter how radiant you look, you can't stand the pressure of one hat after another. Can you give me a chance to defend myself? What are you saying? Sun Jai had already pushed Bamboo Pole away before he could finish speaking. She faced Luonan and spoke sternly, Teacher Luo, if those people just now offended you in any way, I am willing to apologize to you on behalf of these ignorant people. Luonan grunted, there's no need. Sun Jai spoke again, there are some matters that are quite out of line in this grand banquet. But I ask for Teacher Luo's forgiveness. This routine reception banquet is actually the LCRF's expression of gratitude to our colleagues and customers who support our biotechnology research every year. Since our customers involve all walks of life in every field, have different requirements and have different hobbies, as the organizer and co-organizer, We can only seek the greatest common divisor within the limits of our capabilities. Luo Nan grunted but didn't have much of a reaction. Sun Jiai behaved like a diplomat. I won't deny that many customers use their wealth, power and other resources to obtain things that this society doesn't advocate, but it doesn't prohibit, in order to obtain a short period of stimulation. But we also do our utmost to restrain these actions within the bounds of legality and compliance. Bamboo Pole faced his old friend and seemed to agree. That's right. This is a society of law, not a society of morality. Sun Jiai glared at him without the slightest bit of concealment. Luo Nan's voice rang in her ears at practically the same time. Yes. From a technical point of view, there isn't much meaning in distinguishing between legal and illegal configurations on the mental plane before there are legal standards. Quite a few people raised their eyebrows when these words were spoken. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.